The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Houston gets speed, not offensively, on the defensive side of the ball. EJ Speed signs with Houston. EJ Speed to Houston. He finished with 142 tackles last year, 12th in the NFL, 7 tackles for losses, 5 pass deflections, 93 solo tackles, most in his career, 3rd in the league. He also has 6 forced fumbles in his career. Now, this is a guy that plays good downhill. One of his bad traits, missed tackle rate is extremely high, among the league leaders in missed tackles in 2024, which led to some big plays for the opponents. Nearly 40 missed tackles in the last 2 seasons. And the other bad trait being a liability in pass coverage, 450 yards allowed last year, nearly 10 yards per catch, 79 completion percentage. In 2024, he allowed the most yards and was second in completions allowed compared to Texans linebacker Azeez and Henry T, and also allowed more yak yards. 51 defensive stops in 2024. Big Sarge, how do you feel about EJ Speed now being added to Houston for a 1-year deal worth up to $5 million?
What? Hey, John, you ever seen the movie Life?
I have.
You remember when they were all reading, Eddie Murphy was the only one that could read?
Yeah.
And he was reading the letters, and he was like, your mama died, your daddy died, the dog done died. Anybody else want me to read for?
No.
John, that's how I feel with you just reading all that stuff that you just read about EJ Speed. I'm like, what? And I'm sitting here thinking, okay. I was like, this can't be the same EJ Speed that I've watched play over the last couple of years alongside Zaire Franklin up with the Indianapolis Colts. Like, this the same? John, all those stats you just read, because I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know those stats until the Houston Texans got them. And I don't think that it was, really my job to know all of that except what he was good at and what he wasn't good at 2 times a year when the Houston Texans played against them, one in Indianapolis, once at home. But John, if you don't mind, do you still have those stats?
I do.
Could you please read the missed tackles and the pass coverage stats again?
Nearly 40 missed tackles in the last 2 seasons, a 79 completion percentage allowed, 450 yards allowed, 10 yards per catch in 2024, which would have placed him first on this team, yards allowed at the linebacker position, second on this team in terms of completions allowed, if he was a Houston Texan.
And he had 142 tackles last season, right?
142, 93 solos.
So basically, either the Houston Texans picked up Zach Speed or EJ Cunningham. And for those of you all who don't know what I'm referencing, that's Zach Cunningham, that the former linebacker that used to be here, right? I mean,
that's a great, that's a great comparison.
Like he was a tackling machine. But other than that, I mean, and don't get me wrong, with what D'Amico has built here and what he's continued to build here as far as that swarm mentality, Zach Cunningham would have fit right in. But so, and I guess that I'm one of those ones, John, that when I look at the game, like I said, I have not watched all of his games. I've only watched him play against the Houston Texans, and I'm saying to myself, I like him. And, I watched a couple of more games, don't get me wrong. But, John, this is a tough one, man. I'm going to be honest with you. It's a tough one because are you bringing him in for just veteran presence? Are you bringing him in for a depth piece? Like, and don't get me wrong, because Azeez missed a lot of time last year. Henry missed a lot of time. I mean, Henry missed 2 games, I think, last year. Azeez missed 6, if I'm not mistaken. Christian Harris missed like 14. I mean, and so I can understand bringing him in and having that, they're needing that backup piece, somebody who can play the position, because you look at a player like Neville Hewitt, who had to step in a lot last season and play. Neville Hewitt didn't play bad. It was just sometimes it seemed like the game may have, because of his unfamiliarity and lack of presence on the field as far as snaps is concerned during a regular game. Sometimes it was okay, because I remember during his New York Jets Jets days, Neville Hewitt was pretty good, but when you don't, continuously get those reps on the field. So, John, I guess that you're just bringing in EJ Speed and to have a backup piece, to have another set of eyes in that locker room. And in the linebacker room, but he's also a guy that has that mentality, that dog mentality in him that, because a lot of people, besides us, John, there isn't a lot of people that's ever heard of Tarleton State, where he came out of, where he went to school at.
Yeah.
And so, shout out to my fair brother Dietrich. That's the only reason I know about Tarleton. But John, you look at it and you come from a small school like that, you overcome all that adversity and you get to where you are as far as being in the NFL. So I guess it's just that mentality, and John is going to put it to the test of what you said about D'Amico being able to help some of these guys, take their game to the next level. He's one of those guys. I'm pretty sure that D'Amico seen those stats, and then he probably was just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going with what my eyes say. That's what he told me last year during training camp when I asked him about Jeff Okudah, and I can't remember the other the other cornerback that they had brought in.
CJ Henderson.
Yeah, and I said, what did you see from them in order for, to bring him here? And he was like, I look at it from my own eyes. I look at things with my own eyes. I don't take up other people's vision. So maybe he has a plan in place for that, John. But outside of that, I honestly and truly do not know.
I try to make sense of what the Houston Texans do, just so whenever I reference something later on to criticize it, I have a reference to go back and say, well, maybe this is what they were trying to do. And this move really does remind me of bringing in Devin White last year.
Yeah.
And looking at replacing him, right? And that was a late move that Houston made with Devin White to bring in some depth. And at times, Houston was able to use Devin White to, attack the defense, to really get after the quarterback and cause pressure. Speed is a pretty good downhill linebacker who reads and reacts to the run very well. I also see D'Amico and Matt Burke utilizing him on third downs with blitz calls. Again, what they were able to do with Devin White. Devin White had about 15 blitzes last year. You look at what EJ Speed in his blitz amount last year, I think it was north of 50. And so just utilizing him in different ways to create pressure. But I don't see him coming in jeopardizing Henry T for a starting role. No. It's a 1-year deal. It's $5 million. So I feel the same way about him like I do about Trent Brown right now. Competition at the spot, can earn more snaps, bigger role over current Texans youth if they have a great camp. And I think that's what EJ Speed is, a very flexible contract. You can move on from it. If he doesn't work out, we've seen Nick Caserio do that before with 1-year contracts. And ultimately, it does give Houston a special teamer. He came into the league, made his way in the league playing special teams. So look, you look out for Frank Ross in that area. Losing Neville Hewitt, that matters. Yeah. You know how much Neville Hewitt mattered for the special teams unit. And then also, again, he is a vet. You're able to use his athleticism to maybe drop a linebacker back and shoot him down to create that pressure on maybe a 2nd and 8 or a 3rd and 5 passing situation, because Houston want to maybe make sure that they have guys on the back end that can cover well. That's not his strong suit. He doesn't cover well. And so this defense, especially with Matt Burke and D'Amico Ryans, calling the plays, they find ways to get guys in the best situation to succeed. EJ Speed has been successful in the NFL. This is just a guy that I think can come in and maybe push, but not take over any of these starting spots in Azeez and Henry T.
I wonder if bringing him in, like I said, I don't think they have re-signed or brought Neville Hewitt back, and so making him a depth piece on that. But I wonder if that means that they've seen the improvement on Jake Hansen, because they did bring him back on a 1-year deal. They did see the improvement that he made during the limited time that he was able to play, but he's very valuable on their special teams. But John, I'm also wondering, are they still not fully sold on Jamal Hill? Are they fully not sold on Jamal Hill, who technically has only played the linebacker position for 2 years? Coming out of Oregon, he switched from safety to linebacker his last year at Oregon, and then when the Texans drafted him, they drafted him as a linebacker in that rookie position last year. Got hurt, and so he missed the remainder of the season. But I wonder if bringing him in is also giving a player like Jamal Hill another year to develop, another year to learn the game, another year to get learning the linebacker position under his belt.
Yeah, could be. And again, I think what we'll talk about when we come back, I think that this is Houston doing a good job of, making sure that if they fall, it ain't too hard, right? And I also want to clarify, EJ Speed blitzed the quarterback 43 times last year compared to Devin White's 13 times last year. Devin White was featured in 7 games for the Houston Texans and started in one of those games.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. You can also check out daily Major League Baseball lines all season long. The LA Angels travel to our nation's heartland to face the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals have not lost yet, but have Miles Michaelis on the mound. Michaelis struggled mightily last year. The Angels feel like an interesting underdog pick, plus 112. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
Christian Benford is the latest player to get extended by the Buffalo Bills on yet another great value contract.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast.
Well, folks, welcome in. It happened. The Buffalo Bills agreed to a contract extension with cornerback Christian Benford. So we're going to break it all down for you. We'll talk about Benford and the ascension that he's had as a cornerback in the NFL. We'll talk about this contract. We'll talk about how Brandon Beane seems to keep finding value in these extensions. And then we'll get into some discussion on which other players with expiring contracts after the 2025 season could be in play for an extension next. But let's get into it. Christian Benford, 4 years, $76 million. That's an average annual salary of $19 million a season. Of course, Benford was a 2022 sixth-round pick out of Villanova, number 185 overall. He's 24 years old, turns 25 in September. He's entering the last year of that rookie contract, and he had a little bit of a bump. He had the proven performer escalator that'll give him a bump for his 4th year. So he was scheduled to make $3.3 million in 2025, and perhaps that's a little lower, maybe a little higher. Not exactly sure yet on the structure of the deal, but a 4-year extension. So he signed for the foreseeable future, pretty much signed through his prime in Buffalo. In 2024, I thought he really put the exclamation point on a really excellent first 3 seasons. Started 15 games, 95% of the defensive snaps, 58 tackles, 10 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and 3 tackles for loss. I think that Christian Benford is a total stud of a football player. He comes in year 1 as a rookie, as this late round pick, beats out Kyer Elam to be the week 1 starter, and has a good rookie season. Gets cut a little bit short due to injury. We'll talk about injuries later on. Then I thought in year 2, it really came together in terms of Benford playing at a high level, looking like he could be an impact starter. And then in year 3, he completely validated exactly who he is in the NFL. And now he's locked up for 4 more years after 2025. Let me give you some numbers here that I think really validate the player that Christian Benford is. We'll start in 2023. And I've said some of these on the podcast before, but I think they just really tell the story of how outstanding of a player Christian Benford is. In 2023, 9 of Benford's 16 games, he allowed under 25 receiving yards. He allowed 2 or fewer catches in 10 of 16 games. He allowed more than 50 yards only 3 times in 16 games. That was 2023. In 2024, 12 of 18 games started under 25 receiving yards allowed against his coverage. He allowed more than 50 yards in just 3 of 18 games and allowed 2 or fewer receptions in 12 of 18 games. Those are dominant numbers. In fact, it's the lowest yards per coverage snap in the NFL last season. I repeat, Christian Benford allowed the fewest yards per coverage snap in the entire NFL of any cornerback last season. He allowed 1 reception per 15.8 coverage snaps, 4th best in the NFL. Oh, by the way, he's missed just 3 tackles over the last 2 years combined. He tackles, and he is locked down in coverage. I think comfortably, and this should not even be a hot take, Christian Benford has comfortably been a top 5 cornerback in the NFL over the last 2 seasons. And he's a versatile player. Whatever coverage concepts you want to run, Christian Benford can do it. Outstanding press corner, outstanding off-man corner, outstanding zone corner. He tackles. He's enthusiastic about fitting the run. He is a dude. And he's probably my favorite player on this defense. And there's a competitive nature that exists when you watch Christian Benford. Not only is he a versatile technician that's locked down in coverage and loves to tackle, but there is a competitive nature when you watch Christian Benford play where nothing comes easy against him. He strains and he contests and he competes every single inch of every single route. He is an elite competitor on the football field. Love watching him play. Love that the Bills were able to get this done. And how about this for an exciting thought? What if the Bills' pass rush actually gets better this season and the safety play becomes a bit more stable next to Christian Benford? How much better is that going to allow Christian Benford to be? He's already an elite player. Now, what if there's a little more pass rush? What if there's a little bit better safety play? Gets me pretty freaking excited. I listened to Richard Sherman's podcast. Actually, this was during the season. Rasul Douglas did a appearance on that podcast. It's a good conversation. I encourage you to listen to it. And Richard Sherman wanted to ask Rasul Douglas about Christian Benford. And Sherman, like many people, were joking, hey, this guy's a good football player, but what's up with him wearing 47? You can't really take a cornerback seriously if they're wearing 47, right? And you know me, I've even made my own comments about jersey numbers and what it says about guys. And I agree, 47 is a terrible number for a cornerback. But I love the way that Rasul Douglas answered this. And we don't get to hear much from Christian Benford. So feels like anything that we know about Christian Benford, it's because a coach or a player told us that about Christian Benford. I certainly hope that we get to know him a little bit more because the reviews are so strong about, what type of worker he is and what his football character is. But Rasul Douglas on this podcast, after Sherm was joking about the number, Rasul Douglas said, he knows all that about his number and he wants to make 47 different. He said it's part of his story as a late round pick. And Rasul went on to rave about Benford, how hard he works, how good of a dude he is. He said he's a better dude than he is a player. And what he does after practice every single day to fine-tune his technique and really work on things that maybe didn't go right in the last game or maybe didn't go right in that practice, like very detail-oriented. But he's got that mindset of just being a late-round guy. And I think Rasul kind of let us know that he embraces that he wears 47 because it's like a reminder to him of the path that he's been on as a guy that didn't even get invited to the NFL scouting combine, gets drafted in the 6th round, and of course has had the ascension that he's had. But that 47 is like this reminder to him of just what he's had to do to kind of get to this point. And I think you can't help but love that. You can't help but love a guy that's taken advantage of an opportunity as an underdog and not only has made it, but has become what I think is a top 5 corner comfortably in the NFL over the last 2 seasons.
March Madness is here and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. You can also check out daily Major League Baseball lines all season long. The LA Angels travel to our nation's heartland to face the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals have not lost yet, but have Miles Mikolas on the mound. Mikolas struggled mightily last year. The Angels feel like an interesting underdog pick, plus 112. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
A Baltimore Ravens executive took a clear and firm stance on the team's next steps in the Justin Tucker situation.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
Sashi Brown again spoke to reporters down at the league meetings, and obviously Justin Tucker's situation with the Ravens still remains unresolved after, upwards of 15 women have made accusations against Tucker with inappropriate conduct at massage parlors. Tucker is, someone that has been a member of the Ravens for a really long time now. Came in the league in 2012 and has built himself up as this figure in Baltimore. But obviously we don't know the end result of this because the NFL is still conducting their investigation. There have been multiple, accusations, reports, stories that have come out about the situation, but we really haven't heard much about it over the past handful of weeks / the last month. So Sashi Brown, who is the Ravens team president, he spoke about it, was asked questions about it, as he should be and as the Ravens should be, and had a pretty clear and firm stance about what the next steps are for the Ravens, which really, in his words, are just to have the NFL do their thing, and that they're running the investigation, the NFL is, and that the Ravens aren't running their own so as not to complicate things. The Ravens will wait for the results of that investigation, and then they can make a decision based off of that. Sashi Brown said, according to Jess Rebeck here, quote, "The nature of these allegations we take very seriously. These investigations do take time. We want to make sure we have a great understanding and extra understanding of the facts." And, again, reiterated that the team is following the league's lead. So that is the stance Baltimore is taking right now. Just kind of going off of what the NFL is doing, what they're investigating, and what they are finding. So obviously he is making it clear that, yes, the allegations, the Ravens are taking them seriously. And he also added in the length of investigations, never satisfying to anyone involved. But he mentioned it is important to let things play out. But the Ravens are also still under fire, and it came up because Sashi Brown answered a question about it, of their zero tolerance policy that everybody thought existed. John Harbaugh made comments about, but apparently has never existed and will never exist. Sashi Brown was again asked about it, or just, the question in general of, okay, what about a policy here? And he said, according to, again, Jess Rebeck at The Athletic, quote, "The notion is we have a zero tolerance policy where we're going to make decisions just merely based on allegations before we have full understanding of the facts, before we allow investigations to continue. We will never have that policy." So again, the stance there is just letting due process play out, the whole, innocent before guilty type situation. And, we've heard multiple prominent figures speak on this situation where the Ravens, Chris Canty was one of them over on his show. He's former Raven, now does work for ESPN. The whole thing with Justin Tucker and the Ravens is, yes, due process is there. And that's what Chris Canty was kind of reiterating when it came to Justin Tucker. But at the same time, what Canty, and this was on his show on Sportsman, he ended up saying, I'll just read a small tidbit of this so we get context to what I'm trying to say here. He said, quote, "NFL teams have gotten rid of players for less. I'm not trying to disparage different positions, but what makes this situation a lot different than what we had with Deshaun Watson is that Justin Tucker is a kicker. He's one of the most decorated kickers in NFL history and likely will be a Hall of Famer, but he's coming off the worst season of his career. And you have an uncomfortable set of facts that you have to contend with. There is a pattern of behavior here, whether he did something wrong or he didn't do something wrong. He's yet to be determined in a court of law, but his proximity to these types of allegations is enough to be deemed bad for business. If you have such a high standard according to your own head coach, John Harbaugh, why aren't you cutting this dude today? You shouldn't be on the team. If you're true to your word, if there's a standard there, knowing there are 16 different allegations, why is he on your team?" So that's the situation. And we can go back to John Harbaugh's comments on Deshaun Watson. He was very clear. He said that the Ravens were proud. He was proud of the Ravens zero tolerance policy, and mentioned Ray Rice and that whole situation. That's what a lot of people mention when you talk about the quote unquote zero tolerance policy. But said that he had a lot of opinions regarding the Deshaun Watson situation, but wasn't at liberty to share them. But when this is coming out of your own head coach's mouth, and then there's there's all of this, well, okay, now they do have a zero tolerance policy. So then that sets the standard up for your organization. But then something happens here for Justin Tucker, and we haven't heard, what the conclusion of the investigation is for the NFL. But then you have Eric DaCosta refuting some of this stuff. And then obviously Sashi Brown comes out saying that I'm going to have this policy. It creates confusion of like, were they just flaunting that around to just do it and say, oh, hey, look, we're this model organization that does this and has this policy. But then when something big pops up in their own organization, do they say, oh, well, actually, we never had that policy and people just kind of made that up and here we are. But it's literally come out of your head coach's mouth. So the Ravens, that's been the conversation around them. That's what is brewing on social media right now. Because again, this is heavy stuff with Justin Tucker, and whatever the investigation finds, we will figure that out, I guess, over the course of however long it takes. But another note here that Sashi Brown made clear is that Justin Tucker will be able to practice as the investigation continues with offseason programming beginning next month. So if there is no conclusion of this, if the Ravens have made no decision on it, or whatever the case may be, if this is still an ongoing investigation, Justin Tucker will be able to be around the team and will be able to practice and participate in the Ravens offseason programming. So that's another thing that, it's just going to be that, I guess. Now, Sashi Brown did say the Ravens have gotten updates from the NFL on the investigation. Jamison Hensley here providing a quote. One of the great things about the fact that the NFL has taken this on is that it gives more independence to the team, and so we try to respect and stay in arm's length. That coming from Sashi Brown, obviously courtesy of Jamison Hensley. And from Jamison Hensley as well, Sashi Brown says, I think we want to make sure that we have a great understanding of the facts, that we hear both sides of the situation, that we allow the investigation to properly be concluded and make decisions based on full information. So really, again, that has been, that was the stance of Baltimore. Say, you know what? We're letting the NFL do their thing. We're not going to get involved here. We're not going to complicate it. That is the stance and the message that is coming from the Baltimore Ravens on the situation. So there's obviously the component for Justin Tucker of, did he do it? Did he not do it? We don't know what the NFL has found, is finding. Obviously, the allegations that have come forward, they're things you have to take seriously. The Ravens have made that clear, and they're going to have to make a decision. But as Chris Canty said, for the Ravens, they have, or I guess had, I guess you have to use the word had now. They had this reputation of being this team that, you know what? The Ravens, they don't really involve themselves with that, and they distance themselves from anybody who has allegations like that. And yes, due process is a thing, and that is something that has to, in investigations, right? You're going to find the facts. You're going to figure it out. You gather all the information, both sides here, right? Both sides. You get the side of the accusers and you get the side of the accused. And that is obviously how you formulate an investigation, you formulate facts, and that is how you work things out when it comes to this. But it becomes a situation and bad for business. I guess it's just a lose-lose situation for the Ravens, but they are going to have to make a decision whenever this thing fully concludes, and whatever it's going to be, it is going to be a monumental one. And again, the investigation, whatever it turns up, will certainly, I guess, aid Baltimore in that, but they can also make their own decision, right? The investigation can do whatever the NFL's, and then maybe the Ravens choose to run their own, or maybe they choose to fully go off of what the NFL's is. It seems like, I don't want to speak for them or put words in their mouth because they haven't said what they are going to do after it concludes, but, whether they choose to do their own investigation or not, that's up to them. And Sashi Brown, in a quote here from Just Rubeck, said, it wouldn't be fair to our players, wouldn't be fair to any citizens, really, flies in the face of the basics of any modern justice system when it comes to zero tolerance policy. And again, that is referring to making decisions merely based on allegations before we have full understanding of the facts. That is Sashi Brown's quote on that. So again, we hadn't really heard a lot about this situation. I don't know when John Harbaugh and Eric DaCosta are speaking at the league meetings. It could be today. I don't think they've announced anything. So if it is, we'll react to it tomorrow or later. But for now, Sashi Brown, gives his stance and, seemingly the teams on what their next steps are, which is follow the NFL's lead and figure out what the NFL is finding in their investigation.